Hey everybody, this is going to be a video response to Mikko, the Vinyl Corner, his contest where he wanted us to show 10 albums that we would pick to bring with us on a desert island if we only could pick 10. And this is assuming, of course, that we had the electricity and the stereo equipment and everything that we needed to play our records and CDs and tapes and things. So, it's very difficult, as I'm sure you're aware, Mikko, to narrow this down to only 10 titles. And as everybody probably can guess, I would very easily be able to bring 10 Beatles only titles to the island, but I thought to myself, no, I think a lot of people think that. They think, well, I'm just going to pick 10 albums that I love the best and leave it at that. And then I thought to myself, well, you know, if I was really stuck alone on a desert island for the rest of my life, I think that I'd want some variety. So I only picked 4 Beatles albums, 1 solo Beatle album, and let's see if you can guess what the 1 solo Beatle album is, and then the rest are all different. So I started with this, the Beatles' second album. It's my favorite Beatles album and my favorite album of all time. It just reminds me of when I was a very little boy. You know, I ran around the house singing She Loves You when I was a little boy, and I love the sound of this album. I like the style, the sound quality. I know a lot of people object to the Dave Dexter mixes and reverb and everything, but it sounds like a tough, raunchy, rockin' album, and it's got a lot of great early stuff on there that really moves along. It's a no-nonsense, balls-to-the-wall album, I think. If I was going to also have a second early Beatles album on the island, I'd pick this. It's the UK version of A Hard Day's Night. This is all Beatle originals, no remakes, covers on here, and it's the Beatles in great form. I think with this album and also the one before it, I think those 2 albums cover me pretty well on the front of all the early Beatles era. Now, later on in the Beatles, I picked this, Magical Mystery Tour. I like Magical Mystery Tour better than I do Sgt. Pepper. I think it's the better of the psychedelic era from 1967. And you notice this copy is a German pressing. This is not the one we're used to in the U.S., and that's now the standard for everywhere. This has better sound quality, stereo tracks, so I would pick the German copy of Magical Mystery Tour. Last Beatles item would have to be, for me, Abbey Road, because it's the last Beatles record, and they kind of sound like they're having their last hurrah. It's a very uplifting, very positive, very happy kind of album overall, and that alone you would need on a desert island. And I'd have to listen to the optimism of Here Comes the Sun every now and then to get me through. Alright, I could have picked many solo Beatle albums, but if I was only going to pick one, I'd pick Paul McCartney Ram. Reason for this is because there's just so many great styles on this album. It's an early homespun album from Paul. I like his different vocals, and his wife Linda sings interesting harmonies on here. A lot of different styles. Plus, again, there was a hit song on here in 1971, Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey. And I was 9 years old then, and when I hear that song, it reminds me of playing with my friends and all the things I did as a youth. So that brings back happy childhood memories, that song. Okay, now you said we couldn't pick any greatest hits albums, and I thought that was a great idea because the first thing you want to do is go for the hits, or at least I do. I don't know if this qualifies as a hits album, I hope not. It's the movie soundtrack to American Graffiti, which just happens to have a lot of 1950s classics on it. This is a good way of getting all my oldies in here. Two albums with a lot of the greatest rock and roll songs ever on it. So by picking this, I can get my share of the golden 50s and even some early 60s. Okay, now along those lines of 50s and early 60s, I want to get something by Elvis Presley on the desert island, and I didn't know where to go with this because if I could pick, I'd definitely pick a hits compilation. Elvis had a hits album, Elvis's Golden Records, the first one. That's the one I'd pick hands down because it's got all the singles and all the big hits. I think with Elvis, I'd want the 50s hits. But since we can't pick hits albums, I decided to go with, this is not my choice. Originally I was going to pick this, the Complete Sun Sessions, because it has all Elvis's early Sun recordings on here, and I think the early 50s Sun records are probably Elvis's best. But instead, this is the album I'm going to pick. I decided to go with this for LP fans only. And the reason I picked this is it's got a different sampling of songs from the Sun sessions, but also some other songs. So in addition to some Sun recordings like Mystery Train and, you know, Mystery Train and That's Alright Mama, you also have stuff like I Was the One, and Playing for Keeps, and My Baby Left Me, Shake, Rattle, and Roll. So you get the Sun sessions with this album and some other 50s stuff. Okay, I talked about me in my youth, and this album is very big a part of my youth. It's Fleetwood Mac Rumours. I think it's one of the greatest albums ever made. There's no filler on this album. I think it's continuously great, every song. It's the first album I ever listened to that was not a Beatles album that I realized was great. And I said, hey, there's music besides just the Beatles. My younger sister now, who unfortunately passed away 3 years ago, she would listen to this record, and I'd hear her listening to it in the other room, and that's how I got familiar with it. And I love Stevie Nicks, her voice. I think adding Buckingham and Nicks was the greatest thing they ever could have done. And I love Christine McVie's vocals. I think they got two of the best women singers of all time on this album. And it also is the album that was a big hit when I was in my sophomore year in high school. So this reminds me of going to high school where I was living at the time, and all my friends there and such. Okay, now for something completely different, I would pick this soundtrack album. It's a soundtrack to a 1971 movie called The Omega Man, science fiction film starring Charlton Heston, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. Not the greatest movie, but one of my favorite movies. And this may be my all-time favorite movie soundtrack, or very close to the top. I just love the groovy 70s sound of the soundtrack. And it also has a feeling of melancholy and loneliness, because the movie itself is about the last man on Earth. So it would actually fit occasionally the mood of being on a desert island, I think, and being the only person. By the way, this was the original release version of this. It came out later on an enhanced version of this cover, for what it's worth. It's not on vinyl yet, and as soon as it is on vinyl, I'm sure somebody will put it out there, I'm going to pounce right on it. Okay, my last choice is my choice for late 70s, early 80s new wave sound, and that's Eat to the Beat by Blondie. This is my favorite Blondie album, and it really is one of my all-time favorites from this era of, you know, new wave, we might call it. I think this is Blondie's best album. It also, like some other albums, reminds me of this period of my life when I was 17, 18 years old, and, you know, driving around looking for girls and my friends and stuff. So, in addition to it being, in my opinion, a great album through and through, it just reminds me of that period. So I have different periods of time in my choices, which is really good. This album I don't have on vinyl yet. I'm waiting to find a pristine copy with the cellophane on it, which I'm sure exists out there. So anyway, Mikko, thanks a lot for this opportunity. Take care, man.